guys, just let me know where you're from. Just type in the chat box so that I can get a feel for where everybody's at, where you live. Hawaii, Albuquerque, UK, Israel, Canada, USA, awesome, Slovakia, Holland, that's awesome. Alright guys, welcome. Glad we don't have any technical issues today, so I hope you're all looking forward to the show. I certainly am. Way less theory for me to get through today, so lots more painting is going to be a lot more fun. As usual, just one or two little things. We are doing the Ustream thing again, so excuse the really loud adverts. We've got our sound as loud as it can go, yet the adverts still blast you, so one of those things. I'm going to give you guys let me paste you guys the handout. There's no big fancy handout like last week because there's no all that theory. What I've done is I've got us some nice tulip reference pictures for you guys to work from, and we may look at one or two of them as we go along. Alright, I think then let's get going. Guys, as usual, I'm going to sort of chat and I'll keep watching the chat box as we go along, so feel free to post your questions. If I see an interesting one, I will answer it. Otherwise, we will go over to a distinct question and answer session afterwards. If this is your first time you've been painting, don't be scared. We've all been there, it's not a problem. If you have got a canvas ready to paint with, I'm going to be painting in real time. So I've prepared nothing in advance, so you're welcome to paint with and follow along as I do it. If you do find you getting behind, don't rush to keep up, then rather just sit back, relax and watch what I'm doing. Take it all in. It's more important that you look and understand what we're doing as opposed to rushing things and trying to keep up and not taking it all in. You can always go back to the recording, the replay afterwards, and follow slowly at your own pace then. Okay, I think let's go over to, I've got a sample of what we're going to do today, so I think let's go over to that. Then I'll show you what we're going to do. By the way, Dennis is our able cameraman there again, so I'll let him come say hello shortly. Before we can start painting, we did all this nice talk the last 2 weeks about composition and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't for nothing. We've got to plan our painting before we can start painting. If you haven't done that little perfect painting course that we've got, sign yourself up for that. It's absolutely free. It's essential knowledge. You have to plan ahead if you want to get yourself a good painting. So let's take a look. We're going to be doing something like this today. The whole idea is it's absolutely simple. We've kept it to only the basic shadings, so that being your first painting and an introduction to well painting, it's nice and easy to do. There's nothing really funny about the painting, yet I think you'll agree it's a nice and effective painting. It makes a pretty picture at the end of the day. Now, being a still life, we've kept it simple. So when you're doing something like this, the first thing you need to do is just find your positioning. You'll notice that I haven't put the flower perfectly upright. You could put it upright, but again it becomes a little boring to look at. So by tilting it just a little bit to the side, made it a lot more interesting to look at. Then, whenever you're painting, you've always got to choose which direction the sun's coming from and stick to it. That's really important. You've got to know that from before you start painting, and you've got to keep telling yourself or asking yourself, which direction is my sun coming from, even at the last brush stroke. You've got to realize that, because you'll often find when the guys, especially when they're working from photographs and they're combining more than one photograph together, they'll take one photo with the sun, say, coming from the left, and then another one with the sun's coming from the right, and try and combine it, and then your painting looks totally wrong. So if you're doing something like that, remember to flip the one around so that you get the correct lighting on all the objects throughout your painting. So for today we'll take this, we'll sort of stick to this one, our lighting coming from the left hand side. Now let's take a look at some of the things we chatted last week. So we've got our bright lights and our dark shadows. So in this painting, you see this area here is closest to the light because our light's coming like this. Now remember, with our ball example from the first class, we've got the ball, the light comes from this side, there is where it hits it first, and then from there on it's gradually pointing away from the light. So the piece that's pointing towards the light must be the brightest. So this area over here must be the brightest. Guys, I can see myself, so if you can't see the video stream, then I suggest you just refresh your window, and obviously make sure nobody else in the family is busy watching YouTube or anything bandwidth intensive like that, because that will for sure drop your whole signal. So just look into that. Okay, so we've got our sun coming from this side over here. So it's hitting there first, and look at that nice little sunlight patch we've got over there, and everything from there is going gradually darker and darker and darker. Now when you're painting something like this, you're first going to just plan where you want your things, then you've got to start drawing it out. Now when you're drawing, the best thing to do is to simplify. So don't look at that and think, oh my goodness, where do I start? Break it down into little bite-sized chunks. For example, I look at the major shapes in the scene. Here, the flower itself, I try and recognize if I can see a shape that I know, something that I can easily draw. So if I look at that, doesn't it sort of look like an egg? I'm sure I can draw an egg. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to draw an egg first. And then from there you take a look at how does the egg shape that I know how to draw, how does my flower differ from the egg shape, and then we modify it from there. So I think that's what we're going to start doing now. I'll open my canvas so long while you guys are doing that. So I've got a standard 16 by 20 panel canvas. When you start painting, don't go for these huge canvases, and don't go for these tiny little canvases. Small paintings are the hardest to do, but a big canvas may just overwhelm you. Something like a 16 by 20, 18 by 24 is a good size to start off on. Alright. When I'm drawing, I've got myself a nice set of watercolor pencils. So what I do is I choose one that's going to give me a similar color to where I'm going to paint. Well, they keep falling back. How am I going to do this? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So here I'm doing an orange flower. I don't have an orange pencil, but I do have a red one, so I'm going to use my red pencil. Now let's draw ourselves the egg shape. Now I've got my angle. I think I'm going to do maybe something like that, so feel free to draw yourself a little guideline like that. Now I'm going to draw my egg shape. And again, remember, things in nature are always a little rough, or always a little bit off balance, so if you don't get the symmetry 100% correct, it doesn't matter. And for the sake of the video, I'll probably draw a little bit darker than what I should. When you're drawing, draw as light as what you can. Okay, so now I've got my egg shape. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to modify it to look more like my reference picture. So if we can go back up to the reference picture, please. If you notice here, the sides of the tulip are a little bit flatter than an egg shape. An egg shape would sort of come around there like that. So I'm going to flatten out the sides, and the bottom here also seems to be a little bit flatter. So that's what I'm going to do. And then you'll notice here at the top, instead of going in one single rounding, I've got 3 bumps. So I'm going to change my egg shape to have 3 bumps. I think I'm reasonably okay with the flatness on the side there. I'm going to flatten this edge out ever so slightly. And I'm going to give myself my 3 bumps. Something like that. Now, what I always suggest you do is, as you go along, like here I've erased this, or I don't need that little extra piece of the egg shape anymore, so I'm finished with it. So to make sure that you don't eventually have 1,000 lines that you don't know which one is which anymore, erase the ones that you don't need. I've got my egg shape done, so I can erase my center line. And I can erase this top line over here. Okay, let's go back to our picture and let's continue constructing our drawing. Now what I'm going to do is, I've got my little 3 bumps over there. Now I'm going to see what does the flower or each petal do from those bumps down to the bottom. And again, I'm going to try and find shapes that I know. Let's take a look at this one over here. See, that's an S shape. I can draw an S shape. Let's take a look at this one over here. It's a back to front S shape. I'm sure I can do that, so let's do it. So let's start with our S shape. Comes out something like that. And now our back to front S shape. Comes out, say, something like that. I think just to make them interesting, I'm going to bring this one out a little bit further. I don't want them perfectly symmetrical. Maybe something like that. Again, I'm going to erase all the marks that I don't want anymore. So over here, I know this petal overlaps that one, so this little piece of the line is going to disappear. So let's go and take that out. And there you can see I've already, in a few minutes, I've basically got 90% of my drawing work done. Now let's go see what's next. I've got a little stem that comes out over here, and I've got some leaves. So let's go back to our reference picture and see what we need to do. Let's see, where's my ruler. Where this stem comes out, we need to take a look exactly where does it come out of the flower, because I couldn't just draw it anywhere, right? So I take a ruler and I run it up the stem, and I see that that stem comes in sort of roughly in the center of the flower. I think if you go and look in nature, it'll probably be exactly in the center. So I need to get mine also in the center, and it also comes out parallel with the length of the flower. It doesn't come out at this angle or that angle. It comes out, you can almost say 90 degrees. So I need to get mine coming out 90 degrees as well. So let's go and do that quickly. I'm going to use my ruler, again same as before. Now here's a cool little trick. I use the ruler's width to give me a guide on how wide I can make mine. Because now I can use the ruler and just draw two lines parallel to it, like that. Then I can stand back and see if it looks right. If it looks right, then I'm pretty happy. If it doesn't, then figure out why. Is it because it's skew, or is it because it's too thick? Is it too thin? If it looks right, then it's great. Now I'm going to see how do these lines from the stem tie up with the flower itself. Looking at the reference picture, I can see they come in, they join in with a little bit of a curve like that. So draw in the curve. Again, I'm going to erase now those little pieces that I don't need anymore, because I don't want them to show through in my final painting. Cool. Our leaves are pretty plain, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squiggle them in. There's maybe one there, like that. And let's put another one, say, over there. Now, what I'm going to do with a still life, we don't have that much opportunity to create distance. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap this one. Maybe something like that. And that's going to give me a great opportunity to get a little bit of distance, because now I've got two things that are overlapping each other. And that automatically tells me that the one is in front of the other. Okay, let's go and erase all the lines that aren't necessary. If you've got any questions so far, I'm going to go and look at the chat box in a minute. You're welcome to type them in. Okay, let's go and have a quick look at the chat box. Okay, so now that we've got our basic drawing down, and I think you'll agree that wasn't too difficult, was it? So now that we've got our basic drawing down, we can start thinking about colors. So what we're going to do now is do a few little tests on our palette before we actually do the final. Dennis says to me I must darken the lines, so is that better?
Okay.
Is that better, guys? You see what I'm doing now? Notice over here, even though I did draw both of the entire stem in, most of it has disappeared now, but that's fine. That's fine. I still drew it in the beginning to make sure that I get all my angles and my perspectives and everything correct. So our next step now is to get our color right. I always do a few little tests on my palette before I go ahead. And now this is where all our nice color mixing knowledge comes in. I want an orange flower, so now I can put down some orange. When I'm mixing, I always put my colors up the top and then I bring them down to mix. That way we can use our little trick that we showed you in the newsletter to take, if you're not using those paints at the end of the day, to put them back in the tube. I'll probably need some yellow, because to highlight the color, let's get our color wheel again. We're busy with an orange now. To highlight the color, we've got to add the next color up towards yellow, and if necessary white. So I'm going to have to throw some white down there. That. Guys, Dennis does also just check the chat box every now and again, so if there are little things he does let me know. Okay, then we may need to darken it, so I'm going to put a little bit of red down. And if we need to mix a shadow color, we've got to use the opposite color on the color wheel. So for orange, it's blue. So in this case, I think I'll use a bit of French ultramarine. Put a touch of red down. And we'll probably need some white, so I'm going to put some white down as well. And I think that will be enough paint colors to complete this painting. Okay, now to test if my colors are going to work well, before I go ahead and I mix piles and piles of paint, I like to do a quick little test. So I'm going to take some orange and I'm going to put it down, let's say over there. So if I want a basic orange flower, I know that will be my base color then. And I'm going to add yellow to it to highlight the color. Remember, the next color up towards yellow. What I'm looking for is a good contrast between your base color and the highlight. If they're too close, then it's not going to help you much. Now let's mix ourselves a little shadow color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the orange. I want to keep the flower reasonably intense. So I'm first going to just see if I can't get away with darkening the color. So to darken an orange, remember orange is actually a mix, it's a secondary color, it's a mix between red and yellow. So I'm first going to only add a little bit of red to it and see what happens. I think that'll give us a nice little dark color. And then we'll probably want a shadow color as well for areas that are pointing away from the sun. So let's darken him with our red as before, and I'm going to add a little bit of the opposite color into the mix, which is blue. Now the minute you add that opposite color, you see it takes all that brightness away, so that's why I first gone a little bit darker there, to make sure I can go as dark as possible without taking the brightness of our flower away. I think we've got ourselves a nice little range of colors there, all the way from reasonably bright, middles and darks. So let's do a quick little test. Let's take some orange and do a little petal. You can also use a spare canvas, a little piece of canvas, and use a brush. I'm so used to working with a knife that I find it's quick to just quickly do a little knife example here on my palette. Now by doing this, you're going to quickly realize whether you've got enough contrasts or not. Just roughly putting down the colors where I think they'll end up. Nothing fancy, I'm not trying to do all sorts of fancy shadings. I think we've got a reasonable contrast going there, that should look fine. And now what about the background? For the background you can maybe use like greens to give you an idea of there's more foliage and stuff. In other words, it would be out in nature. Or like on our reference picture, maybe we can go and take a look at that one again. Here I've just used a single color background, so it's all up to you. If I had used more greens and stuff in the background, maybe a little bit of blue and a bit of hazy green at the back there, it would look like it's a flower out in the garden. Here I've now used a single color background, which makes it look like a posed flower. So it all depends on the type of effect you want to get. For today I'm going to keep it reasonably simple. We're going to also just do a plain shading. So I'm going to keep my background a reasonably same color. Now when you're choosing your background, if we can get here onto the color wheel quickly, you've got a few choices to make. I'm busy with an orange flower. So if I make my background colors that are next to it on the color wheel, that's going to give me what we call a harmonious feel. In other words, a nice soothing look to it, because all the colors are going to work together. If I use colors that are heading towards opposites on the color wheel, you'll find that what happens is when you put opposites next to each other, when you paint them next to each other, they make each other look brighter. So in other words, if I paint an orange and a blue next to each other, the orange would look oranger and the blue would look oranger. It's quite bizarre, but it does that. It's just something to do with the way our eye works. So if you want a more dramatic type of effect, or if you're trying to get let's say a real modern type of effect in your painting, then you would go for opposites, or almost opposites. And that's going to give you that zoom in those colors that you want. For today I want a nice calm effect, so I'm going to stick to harmonious colors, in other words colors next to each other on the color wheel. So let's go back to our little test colors again. I'm going to take, say, a little bit of white, and let's add a little bit of orange to it, just a tiny amount. Yeah, I think something like that. So now I'm going to pick some up and I'm going to put down next to my little test petal and see if it works. So now you'll quickly see if they work together or not. So I'll just roughly surround it. Now the best thing to do when you're doing something like this is pop him down and then stand back. When you're painting, you always want to stand back every now and again, because when you're painting, you're seeing the painting from real close up, which means you see every little nice brush stroke and so on. But when your painting is finished, it's going to be hanging up on the lounge wall, right? So that'll mean all those little fine details that you've maybe spent hours painting are going to disappear. You're not even going to see them. And you'll also find when you're sitting close, you can see contrast better. So when you got it up on the wall, you may not see those contrasts anymore. So I've just stood back myself and I've noticed that my highlight isn't quite bright enough. So I need to adjust him a little bit. So I'm going to take a little bit of white and add him into that mix over there, just to increase that contrast. And now you can see that power of doing a quick little test on your palette, because it's now saved you a lot of time. Imagine if you'd done all your whole painting and then stood back and realized you haven't got enough contrast. It looks better, right? So, quick look. Yeah, I think that one's going to give us a better highlight. Okay, now that we're happy, now we can mix enough of the correct amounts. So obviously we're going to start with the background first, and then we're going to do the flower. Now, in an ideal world, what you would do is, let's get the palette out the way so we can see our canvas again. In an ideal world, what you would do is you would paint your background and then leave it to dry. When painting, we always start from the back object and we gradually work our way forward. So let's take a look. In this painting over here, you would do the background first, then that petal there, then this petal here, then this petal, or even that, then these two guys because they are in front. Because it's such distinct shapes or separating places, you'd probably get away with being able to do them at any point in time. But let's say, for example, we're going to be painting a tree. If I've got this tree over here, it would be totally impractical for me to paint that one first and then try and squeeze in the sky afterwards. Because look at all these little sky holes that we've got. So if I paint my background, in other words my sky first, then I paint the tree, I'll automatically get natural looking sky holes. If I paint this one first, what a mission it's going to be to try and squeeze them in afterwards. So that's what we do. We paint from back to front simply because it's the practical thing to do. It makes your life a lot easier. Then what we also tend to do is we paint from the lightest color through to the darkest color. So I'm going to put that aside. To make my life easier, I don't want to go too much over these lines over here. So to make my life easier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some masking tape, and I'm going to mask off my flower. That way I can quickly paint my background without worrying about coming directly up to the lines. It takes you 5 minutes to quickly put the masking tape on, but it saves you a good half an hour's worth of edging work. So let me show you how to do that, because your masking tape is straight and I've got to put it on a curved line. So what we do is this. If you can just zoom in here for me, please. You start it off on the line like this. Can you see that? And then do a little centimeter at a time. Put your finger down. I'm just trying to get it so that you guys can see the best. Put your finger down and hold that piece of masking tape in place, and then bend it. Press it down, bend it. And as soon as you see it's going off the line, you put your finger there, press it and bend it. So let me just quickly stop for a second. You'll see I'm getting a perfectly straight line on the outside edge. Here on the inside it's all crumpled up, but I don't care about the inside piece. Alright, so that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to work as fast as I possibly can. Quickly type this guy up. When you're doing yours, you'll obviously work a little bit more accurately. When I get to a thin point, like here at the tip of the, when I get to a thin point like here at the tip of my leaf, obviously I can't make my masking tape thinner, so I'm going to let him overlap like that. That's fine. We'll just leave him there, and then we'll trim him using our craft knife in a few minutes time. And you can see how quick it goes. Only interested in the areas that are on the outside, so you'll notice like over here on these little inside lines, we're obviously not taping them, only the outside. Nearly done. How many minutes has that taken? 3-4 minutes? Not bad. Okay, all that's left to do now is to trim these little edges over here. What we're going to do is, if you're working on a panel like I am, you'll find you can press reasonably hard. If you're working on one of the stretched or the gallery canvases, don't press too hard. What you want to do is lay the whole canvas flat. Let me see if I can get us a canvas and I can demonstrate that. Because this here, you've got this give in it, you can easily punch a hole through that. So what you want to do if you're going to cut on it is take a book or something that's hard and put it underneath. So you've got this kind of thing. So you've got this hard object, so when you're cutting on it, you see this, then this piece becomes solid, and you're not cutting on a hard, or you're not cutting on a soft canvas. You've essentially turned him hard. Then you'll find you won't punch a hole through your canvas so easily. But you've got to be careful. So the big trick here is make sure that the blade of your knife is nice and sharp. The sharper the blade, the less hard you have to press on the canvas. Last one. Okay, just a last little double check, make sure I've got all my outlines done. Then what I like to do is just run my finger along the edge. You want to make sure that none of these little edges are lifting up so that the paint can get in underneath. So just be careful of that. Yeah, it's a little bit close. I'm going to put a tiny little piece over there, and then I think we're good to go. Okay guys, any questions so far? Sarah asks, the masking tape cannot be used for smaller or more complicated drawings. What to do then? Sarah, that's when you'd use your knife and do the little cutting pieces. So I've been able to mask up really complicated drawings like that. Another trick you can do is if you find you're battling to see through the masking tape, you get another clear sheet of tape which the kids use to cover their school books with. They call it clear cover and clear coat, stuff like that. It's almost like it looks like a big see-through sticker. It comes on a roll, so you can stick that whole thing down and then you use your knife to cut out around the contours. We cut out all sorts of things like fish and fairies, you name it. We do all those fancy little shapes by using the same technique. Guys, if you are having hassles with your stream, just like I say, refresh the screen. Would masking fluid work? You could probably use masking fluid, yes, but I think a masking tape is much easier and probably a hang of a lot cheaper. So it's more practical to just use the masking tape, quicker. So yeah, but if you've got some masking fluid around and you want to mask off just little tiny pieces, I suppose you could, but yeah, how are you going to lift it off again? So I don't know, the masking tape just works better for me.
That's what we'll say.
Okay, let's paint the background, guys. I see we're roughly at an hour already, so I'm pretty happy with that. So what I'm going to do now is I've finished my little test over there. I can dump that to make up some more, to make more space on the palette. So I'm throwing a little bit of paint away, but it sure beats throwing a ginormous pile of paint away that's wrong. So now I've got my little test colors that I'm happy with. So what I do is I'm going to pick them up, those little bits of paint, and I'm going to put them down at the top. They're now going to become my test patches. And now I've freed up this entire space over here. I'm going to show you the quickest way of cleaning your palette. Let's take that and throw it away. You take your tips. If you're now wondering what this fancy little gadget is here when I've told you to go and buy a tuna tin, this just allows me to hold my brushes. So I've got my tips in there, and it's got a little sieve at the bottom, which helps when I'm washing the brush. It's just got that little rough surface, and then when I'm painting and my brushes have got paint on them, I can do this. So you know what it's like, you've always got 3 3 fingers too little, so there's your extra 3 fingers. So I've done that for here. I don't often use it. I usually use the tuner tin myself. But I find that's pretty handy when I'm doing demos and stuff, because often you want to just quickly change between brushes without having to wash them. So I tend to use a lot of brushes when I'm doing a demo. It saves me cleaning time. Alright, so to clean your palette, you're going to dip some of your kitchen roll in the tulips. Now it must be reasonably damp, but it mustn't be running off there. Then what you're going to do is you're going to rub it over the area that you want to clean. Now I'm not even pressing hard. If you haven't got enough tips on your piece of paper towel, then you'll find what happens is this here will smudge, and if it's smudging, that means you haven't got enough tips. So pick up a bit more tips. All I'm doing here is I'm diluting that paint that's there. That's the big secret. I'm not trying to clean it at all. I can throw that away. Now I'm going to take my entire kitchen roll like this. And voila, clean palette. Couldn't be quicker and easier than that. This bit of turpsy paint that's on there, that's fine. So what, we're using this to clean our brushes with anyway, so that doesn't matter. Okay, let's mix up enough paint for our background. I tend to mix rather too much, especially like here. I don't want to come back and be remixing paints. So I'm going to mix up this paint as close as I can by the eye to the other one. Then when I feel I've got him reasonably close, I'm going to pick up some of it and I'm going to place him right next to the other one to see if I'm reasonably happy with the match. If you're far out, then you'll quickly notice whether this one, because now you know what colors you've used in the mix. So I'll immediately know, do I need to add more white to that mix, or do I need to add more orange to that mix to get them to match. Now I can already see that's not going to be enough, so let me double up on that quickly. Are you guys all still good? You want to quickly throw me with a few questions? I see we are sort of at the hour mark. Should we stop and have a few questions? I'll continue mixing this piece of paint, and then if you've got a question, type it into the chat box and let me see if I can answer it for you. I think I'm happy with that. Alright, let's have a quick look to see if there's some questions for me. Okay, Lexington asks, is there a way to paint with acrylics and get the look of oils? Yes, most definitely. If you take a look at some of my paintings, some of them are oils, some of them are acrylics, you can't tell the difference. The techniques that you use is exactly the same. You'll find that acrylics, because it's naturally a little bit thinner, you sometimes have to use the texture acrylics to get that nice thicker look, but otherwise, yeah, I get the acrylics to look exactly the same. I can see Dennis wants
the final varnish.
Yes, if you give both paintings a final varnish, there's no way you can tell the difference. Absolutely no ways. What do I mean by texture? With your oils, you tend to have your paint that stands up off the canvas. So let's say, for example, you've used a knife or you've used a thick dollop of paint and you put it down. Because your acrylics is thinner than the oil, its physical consistency, it does tend to sort of
Slump.
yes, I won't say it runs, but it sort of, I don't know, when it dries it flattens.
It slumps.
So Dennis is saying slumps. Maybe that's the best word to use. Where with the oils it doesn't. If you've put it down and it's a centimeter high, it will remain a centimeter high. So with the acrylics, you can use the impasto. I think they call it the impasto. So when you put that, using the impasto acrylics, it's a thicker consistency. So when you put that down to a centimeter high, it will also remain a centimeter high. Alright, it seems like everybody's okay. I think let's carry on and let's get this background painted. What I'm going to do with this paint here, you'll find the consistency is reasonably thick. See there? Now I want to cover a large area and I want to cover it quickly. So I'm going to take my medium and I'm going to thin it down. The consistency that you want is sort of soft margarine consistency. You don't want it thin down as much as an ink. That'll be just simply too much. So I'm going to add a few drops and I'm going to gradually work it in. Rather add too little, you can always add more. Sometimes if you're not quite sure whether you've got the correct consistency yet, paint a little piece. And if you see it's sort of still pasting on, then you know it's still too thick. If you find it's going on and you're getting all these streaks and stripes and getting almost like a transparent see-through kind of effect where you can see the canvas shining through underneath, then you know, oops, you've gone too far. So you'd have to add some more paint to the mix. You can already start to see it's becoming nice and creamy already. Almost there. So it's becoming quite sloppy. I think I'm reasonably happy with that consistency for now. But if I pick it up, you see it's not falling off the knife, it's not running, it's not as thin as that, it's just a soft margarine consistency. Now I've got a large area to fill, so I've got to use a large brush. If you're going to try and paint that close using this brush over here, it's going to not only take you hours and hours and hours, but it's going to give you stripes. There's nothing you can do, it's going to give you stripes because you're only blending that much of an area at a time. So for me to fill that up, I've got to use a nice big hardware brush or a pastry brush. Let me just do a quick little test on my consistency. Yeah, I think it's fine. Okay. Because our canvas is not smooth like a sheet of paper or a piece of glass, it's got some texture or some tooth to it. You want to make sure that when you are painting, you're getting into the weave of the canvas. So there's two ways of doing that. You can either use little crisscrosses like this, or you can scrub it. Whichever works for you. Maybe it's because I'm a man, I don't know, I like to scrub it. I'm going to work reasonably fast because yeah, all we're trying to do is get this area blocked in. When I get to the sides over here, I will work a little bit slower because I don't want to go over the masking tape. Otherwise, the whole exercise of us masking it would have been for nothing. I'm going to fill in the entire background. If you need to use a smaller brush to get into little areas like that, that's fine. Go for those smaller brushes. The rule there is use the best brush for the job. So if you've got a big area, use a big brush. If you've got a small little area like that, use a small brush. The brush you use has got to be practical. What I'm concerned with at this point in time is just to get the canvas covered. The correct term for that is called an underpainting. I'm just underpainting the canvas to get rid of the white. I know a lot of guys ask whether you tone the canvas first. No, I never tone my canvas. Never ever. I've done it once or twice and I was never happy with the result. So I don't tone my canvases. I start off with a white canvas and I continue straight off with the correct color. My logic for not toning my canvas is that no matter what you do, your paints, unless you're painting really thick, your paints are still, the little bit of the canvas is still shining through because the physical layer of paint is so thin that the light is sort of going through the paint, hitting the canvas and bouncing back. So now with a white background, it's hitting white, the light is hitting the white background and bouncing pure light back at my eye. So that to me gives me a bit of a feeling of a translucent effect. And I found every time I've pre-toned the canvas, I've lost that effect. You have to really paste on the paint when you do that to get that vibrant look. But that's just me. If you like to tone your canvases, then yeah, by all means go for it. If it works for you, go for it. That's what's so fun about painting, is because there are so many ways to do the same thing. Okay, so what I've done now is I've just covered the canvas. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to show this to you on the video, so what I want you to do is when you've done this yourself, stand and at different angles until the light is reflecting off your paint. Then you'll see that you have sort of brighter patches and darker patches depending on which direction your brush strokes were running in. Now that's really important when you're painting. For example, I want my background to go past, to look as though it's behind my flower. Now if all my brush strokes are running around my flower like that, I'm going to lose that effect, because even though it's one single color, the brush strokes are reflecting the light, and you'll always see that those brush strokes are going around the flower, and then what happens is you've lost all that distance. So even if it is just one single color like this, always come back in and smooth those initial brush strokes that you've used, smooth them out like that, so that when the light does reflect and hit them, they're reflecting to look as though they're going behind the flower. Very light touch, I'm not pressing hard. You'll find when you're painting, you never have to press hard. I can hardly think of a time when I have to press hard. I often hold the brush so soft that it falls out my hand. Now, what I'm going to do, just to make my background a little bit more interesting, there's a bunch of different things we can do to add a little bit of texture to it. Often the guys use this whole brush stroke effect with the light reflecting off those brush strokes to get little patterns in it. So you use one single color, then you'd maybe put a line going down there like that, leave a brush width, put another line going down there like that, leave a brush width, put another line going down there like that, and then leave a brush width this way and put another line going across there like that. So if you're looking straight on, you cannot see it. But if the light is reflecting off that, you get almost like a bit of a tartan effect. Another thing you can do is, and that's what I'm going to do here today, is I like to add a little bit of extra texture into the background. So I'm going to pick up just a little bit of extra orange and just on the brush. Can you just zoom in on my palette, please? Picking up a little bit of orange and into this. Just mixing up a little bit of a different contrast. Doesn't have to be too much. Just to give me an extra little bit of color. Okay, we can go back to the painting, please. Now I know my sun is coming from this side. Now remember last week we chatted about our spotlight effect. So there is my spotlight, is shining there. And from here it's getting darker and darker, right? So if here I've got my spotlight shining on, that spotlight would not just be pinpointed on the flower, the light will go slightly past and hit the background as well. So we're going to have a similar effect happening to our background, where this area here of the background will be lighter and that area there will be slightly darker. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to get myself a spotlight effect in the background. And I'm going to do that by starting on the corner and gradually working my way in. Now because this is already full of paint, when I start here, as I move in, see what happens? It's mixing with the paint underneath and it's getting lighter and lighter and lighter. So I get little free mixes in between. Saves me lots of time. And just to give it a bit of texture, I'm going to use a little bit of a crisscrossy effect. Like that. Very rough, very quick. Do a little bit on that corner over there. Look him in there as well. If I stop and I pick up more paint, I'm not going to continue from where I left off, otherwise you're suddenly going to have a dark color over there. Start at the corner and work your way back again, so that you get the same mix as what you had before. Yeah, that should do good. You see how much more interesting it looks now, just by adding that tiny amount of texture. Now our spotlight is shining here. You see this distance over here is further away from the light than that distance over there. So in this corner I can go even darker. Again, that will accentuate that whole idea of the sun's coming from the top, the light is coming from the top. See how I'm making the background go past my leaf? You want that continuity where the background is going behind or past things. Now the easiest way of getting yourself to do that is to imagine that that leaf isn't there. Paint like he's not there. So if you need to even tape up the entire entire leaf, including this little piece here in the center, do it. It's more important that you get that continuity past the back, otherwise I promise you'll lose that 3D effect that you're looking for. And like we chatted about last week, we're illusionists. So if you've lost that opportunity to create that illusion of depth, then yeah, what's the point of painting? You've defeated the object. There we go, guys. I think I'm happy with that. Just a nice little quick plain background, nothing too fancy, but I think it'll look pretty. So what we can do now is we can remove our tape. And now you'll find you've got this lovely edging. Thin and sharp. And we've saved an hour. I'm going to leave the leaf because at this point I'm not worried about him. We're going to paint the flowers first. In actual fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, and then this little piece of leaf I'm going to tape him up as well. So again, when I'm painting my flower, I don't have to worry about the leaf. Everybody still good? Any questions? Okay, so now I've taped up the entire leaf. Don't have to worry about him anymore. What the heck, let's do the same with the other one. There we go. Now that I've finished with my background color, I don't need him anymore. But now take a tip from the fool is don't take all that paint now and go and throw it away. Scoop it up. Scoop it up and save him at the top. Now we can go and clean this bottom piece again. So you can now see how I'm working methodically to keep my palette as clean as possible. That's one of the big secrets to make sure that when you're painting, you don't end up with muddy colors Because if you don't clean your palette properly, or keep the area that you're working in clean, it mixes up with all the other little colors around it, or that you've left that haven't cleaned properly, and that's when you get muddy colors. Because you can be sure one of those colors is going to be an opposite somewhere along the line, and there's all your vibrancy gone. Great, so now we're going to work on this petal over here. I think what we can do is let's go back to our reference picture and just see what's happening. Okay guys, I see we are at 9:30 already. So I think what we're going to do is let's go for a distinct question and answer session. Then we'll carry on from next week. I'll let you guys do your background now during the week, and then from next week then we'll do the actual flower. How does that sound? Throw me with a few questions. Key says, don't forget last week when you were telling us about the deal on the Color Buster, you were going to let those of us who purchased one away to get the large one. Yes, I'm busy setting up a sort of a bulk email to all you guys that have bought, that haven't got the little deal. So look out for that. I'll probably still get to that in the week. Beesma says, if this was a white tulip on say a light medium slate colored background, would you use the background color for the right white rose? What you would eventually do is you would take some of the background color and you would reflect it in the white rose. I hope that's answering your question. If you're new to painting, stay away from white flowers. It's quite a trick to paint with white. If you've been painting for quite a while, then go ahead, look carefully at your white flower and see where are those little reflected lights. If you can take a look at one of our Paint Basket TV newsletters, there I've shown you how, I've done a little demo to show you how the white reflects or picks up the colors around it. What am I adding to thin the paint down? I'm using our own little Paint Basket medium. You would use something like a liquid. Any oil painting medium you can use. You can also throw in, where's my brains now? I'll get to the name now.
Linseed oil.
Yeah, you can also use linseed oil. Thanks Dennis, my brain's not all yeah, it's too early in the morning for me. Would you use the same brushes for oils and acrylics, John? Yes, I would definitely use the same brushes for oils and acrylics. No difference. I have one set of brushes whether I'm painting oils and acrylics, use the same ones. Trudy says, I'm so involved in your demo that I thought for a moment I smelled the paint. Well, maybe it's your paint, Trudy, calling you. Sarah says, I use Firefox now, it's working better than Google Chrome. Well, that'll teach you a lesson to use Google Chrome. You've got to use Firefox, it's much better than Chrome, man. What mediums do I use in acrylics? Well, you'd normally just use plain old H2O water, but you do get a retardant that you can use as well, and I see Dennis is aching to tell me something. He's nodding his head, he wanted to mention the retardant too. Okay, Claude is asking, do I always use the tape? Yes, I often use the tape. It saves me a lot of time, especially when I'm doing large backgrounds like this. It saves me a lot of time to get all that fine edging work done. But yeah, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. My palette is a plain old tile that I got at the tile shop. Sunflower, let's take a look at your question. It's quite a long one, so give me a second to read that. First of all, this is a beginner's oil painting course, so I expect you to know nothing. So there's no such thing as a stupid question. There is such thing as a stupid answer, and I'll do my damnedest not to give you a stupid answer. So let's take a look. How do you choose the color and value for the background on a painting like this? Alright, so let's first answer that one question by going back to my reference picture. What I'm looking for is contrasts. If I make my background too dark, I'm not going to have enough contrast for my flower to stand out. So if I've got a dark flower like this, I will use a light background. If I'm using, say, a white flower, then I choose a dark background. Let me get you another example. Let's use this rose of mine as an example. You see I've got a light colored flower, so I've had to go for a dark background to make sure that I've got enough contrast. It's all about our bright lights and our dark shadows that we chatted about last week. So always choose a background that's going to give you the best, make your focal point stand out the best with a still life. Let's see, one time, then Sunflower also says, one time I painted a pink rose and I made the background a green, but I didn't like it and I wasn't sure why, except that I think the rose and the background were too similar in value. Does this make sense? That's exactly what I've just answered, eh? So you've almost answered your own question there, so great. Make sure you've got enough contrast there. Any more questions, guys? Trudy says, thanks Nolan and Dennis for the opportunity to share your knowledge. I just want to add that I left the restaurant and my companions, even my husband, to be in time for this demo. Don't get me into trouble. Luckily I'm sitting on the other side of the earth. Well, thanks Trudy, we appreciate the support. Lexington, which retarder do I use? I use my own little paint basket brand. Like I said the other day, unfortunately we can't sell that out of the studio. I always suggest to the guys that they use something reputable like a liquid. Sunflower, yes, you're saying I changed the background to a darker color, then I did like it better. Must have been the contrast you were talking about. Yeah, there you go. And let's take a look. Wanna paint? Welcome. Having painted in watercolors, a lot of the technique involved letting paint dry before applying the next glaze. Will this background be dry by the next time you paint next week? Is it necessary to let oils dry between glazes? To dry between glazes, yes. Will it be dry next week? That's a very difficult question to answer because it depends on the brand of paint, the color that you've used, and the weather. For example,
The medium.
yes, and how much medium you've got in it and the type of medium. You'll find that different paint colors dry quicker than others. For example, the white tends to take long, so there's a really good chance that next week mine is not going to be quite as dry because at the moment it's winter here, not much sun, it's pretty overcast, so I've got a good chance that it'll still be wet. But then again, I've thrown in quite a bit of medium, so that also speeds up the drying process. So we'll see. What I do suggest you do if you want to dry your stuff is quicker. Put it in your warmest room, not with absolute direct sunlight on it, but with nice warm ambient light on it. It'll dry a lot quicker then. And again, also how much moisture is in the air. The drier the atmosphere, the quicker it's going to dry. Let's take a look and see if there's any more. I tell you what, Dennis, he's sitting there now. I'm scared he falls asleep while I'm answering the questions, and I'm really thirsty. So I'm going to let him. I see there are quite a few questions still. I'm going to let him answer a few questions, and then I'll make the two of us a coffee salon. I wanted to sort of there.
Good morning from our side. As you see, we all togged up. Yesterday we had one of the coldest winters in New Zealand, and if I heard correctly, it's about the coldest that we've had for about the last 80 years, and the biggest dump of snow for many, many years. We haven't got snow here with us, but we've got that very, very icy wind here with us. So let's see what we've got here. And watercolors. If you make a boo-boo, can you just mark it out of the rag? Yes, certainly you can. Especially if you haven't made it painted too thick, you can take a rag. One of the techniques that many of the artists use for when, especially when they start, they paint their whole background, their base color, and then they'll take a rag, take a handkerchief or a thing, do that. And then they'll wipe out and almost draw whatever they need. So that's also what it's called, a wipeout. That is the technical name for it. You can also do that. Let's see the next one. Why not paint the background in acrylic to speed line type? Yes, that is. I often use that technique as well too. There are many artists who paint first. They do maybe 50%, sometimes up to 80%. Ooh, thank you, that's nice on a day like this. They'll do about 80% of their painting, whether it's a still life or a landscape, it doesn't matter. They will do that in acrylics, and then they'll come, put the hairdryer on it, and immediately, once you know it's completely dry, you can then go with your oils over that and then do your final blending through, and but you still let most of the acrylic oils show through. All you're doing is you're touching up, and often what happens is they like to use the oil paint in pastel style on top of that, and then once that is dry, got to let oil dry for about 3 months, 4 months. If it's very, very thin, if it's you've done it real impasto, you may have to wait right up until maybe 10 months. I've had one painting which I did with a painting knife. It took about 9 months before it was actually dry. In 6 months, if you took a nail onto the top here, it was still had a lot of give in it. So you have to definitely wait for a time before you put your glazing on, otherwise you're going to have cracking. Let's see. Ooh, why not paint the background? I missed the beginning of the webinar. Did we draw our own tulip, or do you have a line drawing? Well, I don't know whether Nolan's got a line drawing yet, but
there is I've given you guys in the handout. I've given you some reference drawings that you're allowed to use. The owners of the photographs has given us permission to use them. So I haven't given you a physical line drawing because I don't want you to copy and paste my painting. I want you to do your own tulip. Just keep it simple. Keep it similar to mine, but not the same. What I will do is I'll take a photograph of my completed one already, of one of my completed tulips, and I'll post that on the forum. So if you want to use mine as a guide, that's fine, but I want you to do your tulip.
Okay, that question has been answered. I see here with Anna had 30 centimeters of snow down here. I'm not quite sure whether you also in the south of Australia, which also had a big dump of snow, or you're in the South Island, or the south of the North Island, I'm not quite sure, but anyway, it's very cold. Why is it that you use masking tape? I did not hear the reason, because of too much feedback. Okay, there are various ways you do it. Nolan likes to use the tape. I use it only seldom where I really need it. I've got a very steady hand, and I've got through experience I can do it very accurately. As I said, I use masking tape, but if you feel that you can't get that nice sharp line, then use it. I use masking tape when I'm doing seascapes to keep my horizon right, to keep it nice and straight, so that you don't get the wobbly or this angle or whatever. It's 90 degrees here in Kansas. Can you send some of that heat here at the moment? We can definitely do with it. I've got you beat. It's over here. You're over 100 in Texas. Okay, that's nice, very nice and warm. What is your opinion on tracing paper to copy your picture? I use that a lot.
We'll be doing it.
I use it a lot, but sometimes what I do is you can either blow up your picture, whatever you want to, trace that onto a tracing paper, use a pencil, soft pencil on the back, and trace it on, especially if I'm using watercolors, I'll do that, so that you've got that pencil, it works in, or if I'm doing oils, what I do is I just use carbon paper underneath, and use a ballpoint pen, and then transfer all that. And I think if you use a grid method, or quite often for many years, I never use the grid method. I've got very good eye and hand coordination. I can see what it is, and I can draw reasonably accurate the drawing. But it depends. Do whatever you need to do. In the end, nobody's going to have a look and see whether you've used a carbon paper or tracing or not. Okay, just anyway, it's down in Canterbury. Yeah, okay.
That's where it was.
It's in the Canterbury Plains. Yeah, my daughter's down in Christchurch, so they all got the same as what you got there now. Let's see. Thank Nolan for teaching. I learned a lot. Can't wait till next week. NAC 50. Okay. Thank you very much for being with us. I see you have to leave now, but anyway, be with us again next week. We're going to be here. So, any more questions? I don't see any more coming up at the moment. So, I think it's back to you then, Nolan.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay guys, any last questions? Throw me with one or two more questions please. While you're typing, what's going to happen next week is we're going to complete the flower itself, and we're going to complete the leaves. So it goes reasonably fast, so that should be great fun. Now if you've been painting with, you're going to find that you're sitting with a palette full of paint. So Dennis, if you can just man the camera again for me quickly please. At the moment you're now going to be sitting with a palette full of paint. Now you don't want to waste those paints, do you? So what you're going to do is you're going to take your entire palette like this, and you're going to take yourself some cling film, the one that you use in the kitchen to wrap up the food, and you're going to take your whole palette and you're going to cling wrap it. Like that. There, when it's covered, you're going to take it just like this, and you're going to go and either put it in your fridge or in your freezer. Next week before the class, say 5 minutes or 10 minutes before class, you take it out the fridge, unwrap it, and we should be reasonably good to go. What you do want to do is keep these paints on as big a pile as possible, because if they're all flat and spread out, they will still continue drying. By putting it in the fridge, it just slows down the drying process. So by keeping it into a pile, if it has dried and it's formed a little bit of a skin, it's easy to scoop that skin off and continue painting with a good paint on the inside. That little trick will save you tons and tons and tons of paint and money. So I think from my side and from Dennis's side, we say cheerio from Paint Basket TV. Thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next week.